1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the 1% of socio-political elites who often own multinational corporations, run them as board and C-suite, or who have some sort of controlling share through debt and equity financing, often at its base have a commonality of being old, white men who are on average largely conservative and patriarchal, who, as what my partner said in their POI, have profit and shareholder incentives to be able to prioritize that as opposed to being able to change and help the world. This isn't a generalization, right? Like, for real, examine and take a look at the world's largest companies, and you're going to see that a huge commonality among the owners, board of directors, and C-suite are often particular rich individuals from legacy institutions who often are political dynasties and influential rich families. We think, primarily because of how resources are, opportunity cost, scarcity, and trade-offs, this often comes at the expense of the urban poor. This often comes at the cost of not necessarily being able to hire as many women or as many particular queer individuals because of the legacy connections that they have with Harvard and other Ivy Leagues, where they're likely to keep a lot of these insular and even in many instances keep it within the family so that those people who are major shareholders and even pay for their particular campaigns are ultimately a part of that. At best, throwing a bone to the other side, what you get is all the forced bullshit that we see with DEI and a lot of things like rainbow capitalism, which at its base become tokenistic and are ultimately a disservice to these particular individuals fighting the good fight and fighting for things which they believe are important for them. A few key points of framing which we think are important for the round. Number 1, this is a clear value judgment debate about the strategy and trade-offs that these particular social movements ought to do in terms of how it affects them and how it affects society. Because it's not an actor motion, it's a value judgment. We have to compare that. Meaning, the comparative is quite clear. On side proposition, you have this whole kumbaya, cooperative, let's game it out and fix it out kind of thing, which we think places them at a position of leverage, especially since they have the capital and authority, and ultimately, at some point, forces you to capitulate to their desires because, of course, in order to even get a meeting in that particular room, they already have a particular advantage. The problem with this comparative is that it's path and outcome dependent to them even accommodating you in the meeting room, and the point in which you already try and set a meeting with them puts them on a pedestal that forces you to look up at them and them to look down at you, already creating this asymmetrical power dynamic in terms of how these negotiations are going to go. Meaning, of course, primarily because they're profit incentive, they need to essentially be able to always negotiate and frame things in a way that's advantageous to them. I know that they say, yeah, brah, but the best negotiations always have both parties walking out unhappy. But bro, you need their cooperation more than they need to genuflect to progressive, liberal, and woke ideologies, because in instances where they do it right now in society, it's just tokenistic. The second thing is taking a look at the comparative on our side, wherein why it has to be adversarial, what exactly this opposition looks like. This looks like Greta Thunberg being able to go out there and speak to a lot of these particular individuals, forwarding their ideas. Yeah, people said so much shit about her, but at least on average, that allowed a lot of more young individuals, especially with the rise of social media, to actually give a shit about the environment and even crack down and become skeptical on the World Economic Forum and all of these people in Davos flying their private jets there. This also looks like movements like Occupy Wall Street for minority workers and individuals who largely become laid off and wrecked by a lot of these consulting, investment banker, Ivy League individuals. Meaning, the reason why this has to be adversarial, the reason why this has to be through some sort of collective action in terms of holding demonstrations and getting angry and being able to hold them accountable is because of the scarcity of resources and limited capacities of the movement and of society to be able to perceive it. In terms of the movement, we're of course particularly talking about queer and gender minorities like the feminist movement and the LGBTQ, but also of course the environment, since of course a lot of these things largely affect these particular individuals. Before that, POI, opening gov, why not?
Do you think that your movement gonna be so jargonistic and people will just see as the edgy social justice warrior protester? Why that will be sustainable on you?
Because that leads to change. That allows politicians like Congress and Senate who are crafting laws to be like, hey, these people who are taxpayers, they're a force to be reckoned with. They're actually getting pissed and willing to be able to go out and hold these particular people accountable. The problem on your side is because trying to like fight for all of these like woke, liberal, progressive debate values, all of that, it often comes at an opportunity cost of them essentially having to do things like raise costs and incur particular expenses which essentially harm their bottom line. Meaning, oh my God, yeah, yay, affirmative action, DEI. If they want to hire more people, like women, trans, particular individuals, it's going to cost particularly more money. That, in and of itself, shows an incongruent and diametrically opposed incentive in terms of what you're fighting for and what those particular people want. The impact here is that essentially undermines what the movement stands for in terms of being fundamentally opposed to what you want, and in instances that matter, doesn't really allow you to reach the root cause of the particular problem. Because, let's say you're a particular shell company or oil company or energy company, what incentive do you have to be able to care about the environment, right? No matter how these people try to knock and say, we gotta go green, oftentimes that's just gonna end up in some sort of circle jerk and kind of very tokenistic form of being able to help. The second particular idea, as a direct response to their side, is that we have to understand that these particular institutions are for profit, meaning they're not government institutions, they're not local politicians or party lists, they're not NGOs or charities, they aren't the normal people. These are the literal people who get in the way of being able to do things, given a lot of the pollution that they have on the environment and a lot of the atrocities that we've seen proven as a consequence to these particular minorities. Meaning, in order for us to be able to ride on the coattails and success of social media, to be able to like cancel and call out the particular people, off which is the only path to be able to get some sort of legislative reform, we think it's particularly best on our side. And for all of those reasons, we are very proud to stand on side negative. Thanks.